everyone, and welcome to Open Hour. I'm really excited this month. Our topic is on energy, which has been a really interesting topic for Public Lab for a long time, but especially of late. It was one of the first topics coming out of the barn raising that everybody was really interested in coming back together and having a conversation again. So post barn raising, this is our first Open Hour, and I'm very excited to introduce two people who are on the live call with me today. Hello everyone, and welcome to Open Hour. I'm really excited this month. Our topic is on energy, which has been a really interesting topic for Public Lab for a long time, but especially of late. It was one of the first topics coming out of the barn raising that everybody was really interested in. One of you have the Open Hour page open?
Oh,
so,
I'm sorry. I think I do.
First Open Hour, and I'm very excited. If you want to go ahead and close it, because it actually on the live call with me today. Hello everyone, and welcome to Open Hour. I'm really excited this month. Our topic. Have you maybe have the Open Hour page open?
I think I've closed all the pages. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. Sorry about that.
That was really strange.
I think it's because we had our pages open so we could see the chat room.
No worries. I'll monitor the chat room.
Very stereo, you know, it's like a surround sound effect.
I was like, I'm pretty sure I just said that.
I was like, I don't know what's happening. Steve is
that was really surreal.
So, what happens?
Good times.
Great. So as I was saying, I'll hear it a few times as you watch the repeat. Sorry about that. But welcome to Open Hour, and we have two really great guest speakers on here, and hopefully more to come. And just for those of you who are watching, I see there are a couple people watching right now. You can go on to publiclab.org/wiki/openhour and click the link to join us in the call live. But I'm joined today right now by Ann Chen and Sarah Wiley, who have both really spurred on this discussion within Public Lab, not only as a topic for Open Hour, but ultimately a lot on the Google groups and on the Public Lab page itself with wikis and projects. So I'd love to pass it over. Sarah or Ann, you were going to go first. Do you want to talk a little bit about your interest in energy and what brought you here, projects you're working on, and things like that?
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, my name is Anne, and I'm an artist and a researcher, and I'm interested specifically in heavy oil extraction in the oil sands industry in northern Canada, in the province of Alberta. And I'm broadly interested in its cultural, economic, and political, and also environmental impacts. So I'm in Canada this year on a Fulbright. It's a partnership with National Geographic with a focus on digital storytelling. And my proposal was to follow the proposed path of a pipeline called the Northern Gateway Pipeline, which would bring heavy oil from Alberta all the way to the BC coast. And so, I got involved with it because I was already a member of Public Lab, and I've been using some of the area mapping tools to map wetlands and using it in my artistic research. And I saw a way to use the mapping tools to try and document this area before it changes. So that's kind of my interest right now is, you know, an attempt to create this, this baseline study of the Northern Gateway route, the landscapes that it passes through, and the towns and communities. So I'm connecting with different communities along the pipeline route and hoping to lead community-based workshops to show people how to use these tools so that they could, you know, go out in the field and, you know, and kind of collect this information so it becomes an archive in the future. And a lot of this was, you know, based on what Public Lab is already doing. And I think at the most recent barn raising, I just had a lot of questions, you know, sort of like how to, you know, talk to people in the industry, but also talk to volunteers and activists who are working around energy studies. And I started talking to Sarah about it, and we thought, you know, it'd be a good idea to kind of focus on maybe reaching out to the Public Lab community to see who else is interested in these areas. Yeah, so that's kind of it. I guess if anyone has any questions, I can answer it along the way. But
so Scott is sitting here. Do you want to go ahead and speak your question, Scott? This is because the people who are watching on the Public Lab page can't see what you posted on the Google chat page.
Oh, hey. I'm Scott in New Orleans, and I don't know what the agenda is, but I posted a question, you know, when is energy worth it? And I think that's a question we're asking all of us, if you're in industry or if you're in government or if you're in the nonprofit community. Like, when is it worth it? In Louisiana, sometimes just asking that question is very political. So, you know, because it's been assumed, at least where I am in the world, that energy, and by that I mean oil and gas, extractive energy, is always worth it. And I think when we talk about public lab tools or any science, you know, we're talking about measuring things and observing things to try to talk about this question, in my mind. So that's kind of like my comment to Anne. Thanks, Anne.
yeah, that's a good one.
Thanks. Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about your interest in the energy topic and what brings you here today?
Sure, and I think that question that you asked, Scott, really goes to the heart of a lot of what I work on. So my name's Sarah Wiley. I'm a co-founder of Public Lab, and I left Public Lab in 2012, I think maybe, to go to Northeastern University and help start a new social science environmental health research institute there called CERI, that's between the health sciences and sociology and anthropology. And I really came to all of this work from being an anthropologist of science and looking at the development of hydraulic fracking and its impact on communities in Colorado, beginning in 2006. And this question of whose land gets sacrificed, whose lives are changed, whose riches are made, and with energy extraction has really motivated my work for a long time, and was really a big influence on why Public Lab was interesting to me, in part because I wanted to have conversations like this one, where we could start bringing together people who are working in Alberta, people who are working in Louisiana, people like Holden who are working in Chicago, and people like me who are working out in Wyoming, to really think systematically about energy, and try and say, can we begin to organize from the grassroots a way of looking at the impact of our energy systems more holistically. So really starting to understand what's it like to live around energy extraction, what are the consequences of being around energy manufacture, coal-fired power plants, natural gas-fired power plants, living around refineries, and what are the consequences of living amidst our energy systems as consumers. So a lot of my work with thermal imaging, looking at making thermal images of homes and looking at thermal pollution from power plants, has been about how can we make this industry that's infrastructural, that shapes absolutely everything about our day-to-day lives, more palpable to us as people who can actually influence and shape its direction and development, which is going to be crucial for addressing climate change. So I have a set of slides showing kind of the different projects that I've worked on. And the question that I was hoping we could talk about somewhat today is how can we think about connecting up communities across energy systems through public lab tools to really think about our, how we're connected by this infrastructure and how we can, from the grassroots, become more powerful in shaping it.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And while you're pulling those up, I just like to remind people who are watching that they can join us in on the live call. If you go to publiclab.org/wiki/OpenHour and click the Join the Call link, you can join us right here. Or you can join us in the chat room on the Public Lab page and post your questions and comments. So thank you, and I see your slides up now, Sarah.
Did that work? Okay, so I'll just quickly spin through this. Kind of the idea that I was trying to bring up here was thinking about energy from the point of extraction. So this is a ranch where I've been working in Wyoming, to areas where you're living.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you actually enlarge the image?
Hold on a sec.
Yep, that's a bit better.
Can
You
I
can do a full screen.
Oh, it's not full screen right now?
I think you stopped sharing.
Okay, here, let me try that again. Let me try sharing my entire screen and see if that makes a difference. Does that work? Can you able to see my whole screen now?
That's perfect.
Awesome. And can you guys see my cursor?
No.
Okay, so the bottom left image here of an oil well is an oil extraction happening in Wyoming, where I've been working on mapping one of the hazards associated with natural gas production, natural gas and oil production, hydrogen sulfide. And then the middle shot here shows some work that Holden and I have collaborated on with community organizations in the southeast side of Chicago, mapping waste piles from pet coke, which is a byproduct from tar sands. And then here over on the far left picture is an image of a thermal image made using Public Labs thermal flashlights to look at heating in homes. So kind of what I've been trying to think about is how can we start to look across energy systems from extraction to production and to consumption. So just a little bit more on the work that brought me to Public Lab and to really thinking about the impacts of energy extraction. This is a screenshot from a project that I co-directed at MIT before starting Public Lab called Well Watch, where we organized basically a Wikipedia for people living around oil and gas wells, and we brought together wells from 5 different states and then enabled people to add their photos, add their comments, and add their experiences about living around natural gas extraction. So here's just a quick example of how one person in Colorado used Well Watch as kind of a diary of exposure events and their symptoms, and then they supported those experiences with a letter from their doctor requesting information from one of the companies about emissions in their area, because he felt the emissions were leading to the rashes that her son was experiencing and their problems with spontaneous nosebleeds. So I've been really interested in how can we kind of build platforms for sharing stories about what it's like to live amidst extraction. This is another page from Well Watch that shows complaints about water contamination, to highlight the point that, you know, as Anne brought up, this isn't just about, you know, disruption of landscape, it's about disruption of air and water, and livestock health and your own health. This small image insert here shows the damage from an acid spill that happened on a Pennsylvania farmer's property, and it burned through some of those trees and killed off all of the grass around his pond. And one of the problems with extractive industries is this scale event isn't really captured and studied, but this is the kind of grassroots impact of oil and gas extraction in a kind of literal way. And so moving on from Well Watch and coming to Public Lab, I've been working for the past 3 years in developing a way to visualize this neurotoxic gas, hydrogen sulfide, that smells like rotten eggs. So you know you're being exposed to it. You can tell you're smelling something, but there's no way to see it. And H2S is not regulated at the point of oil and gas extraction, so there's no monitoring of this gas on the ranch property where I've been working here, and what we've been able to see is that there's very high levels of H2S at areas in this discharge canal where the water is supposed to be running off clean. So what we're seeing here in these 2 bottom images are pieces of photographic paper, and photographic paper has silver halide in it, which tarnishes with exposure to hydrogen sulfide. So the areas where you're seeing darker brown is where there's a higher level of H2S. So I've been really interested in how Public Lab approaches can start to make some of these really palpable hazards like hydrogen sulfide, where people can smell it all the time. They're experiencing symptoms coincident with H2S exposure, but how can they make that exposure experience more visible? So I think there's lots more we could be doing to analyze the impacts of energy extraction. Just a couple of others. Clearly, Anne's work looking at tar sands, Matt Lippencott's work on frac sand mining, but there's tons of other possible projects that would be interesting to discuss, from monitoring particulate matter at fracking sites to looking at volatile organic chemical emissions from wells and processing facilities, looking at water quality impacts. I'd be really interested to hear more about Holden's work on this. And looking at methane emissions, because methane's such a potent climate change, or such a potent greenhouse gas. It would be really great to start tracking emissions from fugitive methane emissions. So just quickly swinging through energy production and what's happening with Public Lab and work I've been doing around energy production. This screen shows work using the thermal fishing bob, which basically is a light that changes color based on the temperature of whatever its thermometer is placed into. And so here we're mapping the thermal plume from a power plant on the Charles River in Boston, the Kendall Station power plant. And you can see as the thermal fishing bob is dropped in above the plume, it's cold water, and then it's getting gradually warmer, and then as it goes through the plume, it's going very bright red. So I'm really interested in how the thermal fishing bob could be used to look at the thermal plumes from power plants. And then another project that I've been working on in this area is in collaboration with Holden, mapping petcoke waste piles in Chicago, and I'll leave that for him to discuss further. But this is a byproduct from tar sands refining in Indiana that's shipped to the southeast side of Chicago and stored in these very large open-air pits right along the Calumet River. And then quickly to energy consumption. Public Lab also has research that could be really useful in thinking about energy consumption, particularly the thermal flashlight. So this slide just shows a couple of early thermal flashlight pictures. The one on the right-hand side here was done at a community environmental college sponsored by Brown University in Rhode Island. And here, high school students have made their own thermal flashlights. That's those things in the VHS film boxes on the left there, and use them to visualize this hot water pipe in their area, well, in the building that they're working in. And my students at Northeastern have been expanding on this. Here's one of my students. They made a thermal flashlight cane, and then they took it out to investigate pipes around the university. This is one of the university buildings that they looked at, in particular, Nightingale Hall, and they looked at the whether or not the thermal flashlights could pick up any problems with the piping infrastructure. And this is one pipe they looked at showing up all green, and they didn't see any problems. And then they found one pipe where there was hot air coming out of it, and were able to show that there was a thermal insulation deficiency on that pipe. So I thought this is just another really interesting case of a public lab tool being immediately useful in kind of an urban environment. This is another project my students did where they investigated freezers, and they looked at their refrigerators and looked at the success of different refrigerator models. These are the different model numbers. And this is one fridge that they investigated where they found out by doing this thermal image of this fridge that it was too high in temperature, and actually realized that that model's been discontinued because it was too warm, but it's still being used in the students' dorms. It hasn't been discontinued, so it provided them a nice, like, actionable item to try and get this refrigerator replaced in their dorms. Here's another more successfully operating fridge to show you the difference between one that was found to be too warm and one that was found to be working at the right temperature. There's just tying this to climate change. Another set of student projects was looking at the heating of classrooms after hours. So this is basically when nobody's actually using the rooms, but the rooms are still being heated. And I'll speed through this one, but they were really interested in how could this tie to energy initiatives being done on campus. They built themselves a thermal flashlight tennis racket. And then these are two classrooms that they compared. And what they found was this one in the Shillman classroom here on the left-hand side that's all red was routinely heated very high even when nobody was in it. So this raised another question for just how could the university start lowering its energy bill and be more energy efficient by just not heating classrooms in the off hours. So I think there's lots more research that could be done by Public Lab to think about analyzing energy systems at the point of consumption too, and I just wanted to call out the research that's been done around natural gas emissions from pipelines throughout cities. This is a great project done using a methane sensor in the back of a car and then just driving that car around Boston streets and being able to find all of these leaks for natural gas that were going unnoticed. So the questions that I was just hoping we could discuss is how can we connect these research projects more clearly on Public Lab? Can we start an energy common tag that we use for any research that has to do with energy? Could we do a diagram of an energy system and link projects to that diagram? Or could we build a map of energy-related projects? What I'd really love to do is try and build a systematic research project across an energy system. So looking at natural gas to natural gas-fired power plants to refineries that are using natural gas for the feedstock for petrochemicals, for instance, or systematically connecting Anne's work with the work of the communities in Chicago who are all dealing with oil and tar sands. And then just broadly, are there other big energy projects we could think about developing? Thank you. Sorry to go on a bit long.
No, you're fine. Thank you, Sarah. That was excellent. And I think you brought up a really good point that I'd like to return to later, which is just the thought that, you know, some of the people that were come to Public Lab, they're not just facing energy and the energy issue from maybe the more visually and socially compelling aspects of extraction of oil or of coal, but actually on all ends of the spectrum. So bringing up the issue of sand frac mining and how that's actually really related to the energy issues, and that these are all on different ends of the spectrum but need to be viewed at as the whole issue. So thank you for bringing that up. That I'd love to get back to that. But Holden, I'm so glad that you could make this call. I have to tell you, I've been getting a number of emails from people who are really interested in the work that you guys have done in Chicago on the Petcoke project, and there are a number of people who are interested in doing very similar things. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit about your project that you did with Sarah, and maybe some of the challenges you encountered, what the main goal was, advice you would give other groups who are interested in pursuing similar things.
Definitely. Yeah, as Sarah definitely mentioned, you know, we started out, well, actually I was a student of Sarah's at first, and she introduced me to this project. It was similar to some of the classwork that I was doing, and what our goal was to assist a few different community groups in Southeast Chicago, and they were very interested in not only mapping the area where the petcoke was being stored on site, but also seeing if there was any other types of measurements they could kind of do on their own. So we looked into, you know, maybe estimating the volume of the piles through a few different methods, and also maybe doing a little bit of kind of low-cost air quality monitoring as well, just seeing how far the petcoke actually drifts throughout the community as well. And it started out, we did 2 workshops to start. We, you know, we went out and were able to meet with several community members. They were, I think, very successful, got a lot of people very interested in it, and it was really cool, you know, showing people how really easy it is to collect this type of data. And the workshop, the basic structure was to go through we actually used a lot of Public Lab's past projects as examples of ways people kind of become interested in their communities. A lot of the participants were people that were, you know, doing this kind of civil science for the first time. So we kind of did that, and then we kind of went over, you know, petcoke, you know, how we're going to go out and measure it today, and then actually conducting balloon mappings of the area as well. And sometimes they were more successful than others, mostly due to weather. Whether it was a very windy day or whether it was a nice day and the balloon went where we wanted it to, that kind of thing. One that was really important from the start, we really, told them it's not about the data that we get today necessarily, it's about the data that we'll be able to collect over the long term. So, if the weather was bad, if we were unable, it was very understood. This is I hope that you guys take and really run with this and continue monitoring. And we tried to, we were able to provide them with some resources where they would be able to, without their most recent outing. Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, was in December. They were actually able to collaborate with an art group in the area and go out on a boat, and that was a big ask that they had because a lot of the I'm sorry if maybe I'm breaking up a little bit. I'm not
You
sure.
were for just a second, but it's coming back now. So I think we missed a small section you said right before you were talking about the December outing.
Yeah, so a lot of the pet coke storage facilities are share a common river in the area, and so what we had kind of dreamt of doing for a while was getting renting a boat of some kind, or even a small kayak or something like that, and going down the river and being able to map all the sites, because then we would be very, very close to the sites. We were using different roads, parking lots, that kind of thing, public spaces like that to conduct the balloon mapping. And they were able to go out into the river actually and do a mapping from that. So it was with another group that was conducting the mapping, but I think they that's definitely that in this time maybe space melts as well.
We're losing you again, Holden.
Very cool. Hopefully they'll be able to do that kind of thing.
Holden, are you there? Hello?
Hello. Sorry.
Okay, we lost you again for a second. So backtrack like 2 sentences.
Yes, Sarah just reminded me. The Art Institute of Chicago was the group that was assisted them, and they were able to go out on the river, and hopefully, the hope is that they'll be able to continue that because we feel that might be a very, very good place for them to do more of the mappings in the future. It would be much closer to the sites. One thing that the community group,
we're losing you again.
Pet coke, not necessarily get rid of it, but just move it out of the. I'm sorry. I'll backtrack a little bit. There were a few rallies in the area around pet coke. A lot of more community members trying to get involved, and so a lot of the companies started moving some of the piles into less visible areas, which also, made balloon mappings from the streets a little bit more difficult. So one thing they've definitely been working on is really finding good areas to map from, because it's a really large area. For example, one property, we used 2 different mapping sites to try to cover more of an area. And we weren't quite able to get, all of the corners of the property.
Great. And I will post on the OpenHour page, I'll post links to the research notes that you put up about the mapping. But if you could share any information about how you did that calculation, that would be great.
Yeah, it's a really simple. So what I was trying to do is give them an easy way to kind of estimate the volume of the piles. It's not it's definitely not an exact science, as I discovered, going out and taking measurements with them. But basically, what it is, it's the same concept. If anyone's tried to measure a tree, the height of a tree, you really just need to know the distance from where you are to the base of the tree, and the angle from your eye to the top of the tree as well. And with Google Maps, you can actually, if you look where your location is using your phone, or
We're losing one more time.
and an object, oh, sorry. If you stand next to something prominent that you can find later on Google Maps, it's very easy using Google Earth to actually measure the distance from where you're standing to, in this case, the top of the hill. So you have that information. There's a lot of apps that can give you a angle measurement.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. You're good. I think we got it. You used an angle measurement with Google Earth. And tell me if I've missed anything. I'll just try to recap where I think we lost you. And just by using the measurement, the distance from the known object to the petcoke pile, you were able to estimate the heights of the piles. What did we miss? That's what we caught here.
And Scott just...
Nope, we've lost you again. So
and about making sure that we're using. It looks like it's about making sure that we're using public land. We actually did run into that issue once. We were using what we thought was a public road, but it ended up was actually owned by the nearby railroad. So what happened was we were on the property, and it was. It wasn't the most developed. There wasn't houses on it or anything. It was some kind of small road, and we conducted the mapping from there. And we did have a security guard approach us and ask us, what are we doing? You need to visit the property, and we just kind of said, oh, we were under the impression that it was public property, and that was true. We didn't, we didn't jump a fence or anything to get there. So we kind of packed up quickly and left, and we did get some photos from that, but we did not use them because they were taken from private property, so we didn't feel that they were quite good data, I would say. But yeah, it's definitely something to be careful of. I'm not sure about the river and the ownership of the river, Scott. It looks like you were asking about that too. But that would definitely be a good thing for them, for us to look up and check on. I do know that there's several. I know, for example, it's been mentioned that there's fishing boats and things like that on the river. But yeah, definitely something to be aware of. Doing a balloon mapping, where you're standing. Either making sure you're in some kind of. I've done the the rule that if it's a public road, something like on a sidewalk or something like that, making sure it's not private property is always definitely a must.
And yeah, I'll just add, it looks like we have some funding to do a set of maps from the river over this spring, so we're going to be meeting to talk about that shortly with the two community groups that we've been working with are Ban Petcoke and the Southeast Environmental Task Force in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks for talking about this. I think somebody is not on. Is showing the video from the website. If you could actually close the website if you're on the live call, so we don't get the feedback. Okay. Nope. All right. Okay, Scott, it was you, and I've muted you, so to fix that, but I'd love to ask you a question. So if you could close the Public Lab page where the video is playing so we don't get the feedback. then I can bring you back in. No, I don't think you fixed it.
All right. I'm pretty sure that's it. Is that not it?
No. Are other people getting feedback?
I still hear that.
Yeah, close the public lab page, Scott.
I only have one thing open. Should I just... I'll close my browser.
Again.
No.
Oh, it's so confusing. Anne and I already did this twice, so...
Yeah, this happened already once in the beginning.
I think there are 3 going.
Well, I know there are a few viewers on here, and so I'll just, to drive everyone crazy, I'm going to direct you again to where you can join us on the live call, and that's publiclab.org/wiki/OpenHour, and then it's the first link there on the page to actually get in the call, which would be great. Otherwise, watching is excellent as well. Oh, Scott, I see you're back. Is it better? Hello? Now you're muted.
Do you want me to talk?
Yeah, I just want to make sure your echo's perfect. It's much better. Okay. So I would love to ask you a couple questions, Louisiana specific, because down here we're really dealing with a number of these energy issues right up front right now that are changing. And I would love, I know there are a couple people who have been really interested in your mapping of the RAM terminal, but also beyond that, if you could talk a little bit about what's happened lately with what people have been pushing for in fracking that has really made some headway on the energy issues.
Well, to be clear, it wasn't the RAM coal terminal. It was the United Bulk oil tanking.
Okay.
It's a coal and pet coke transfer facility here on the Gulf Coast, in particular Louisiana. All of our the Mississippi River is a large conduit for shipping coal out of the country from Illinois and Kentucky and now Wyoming and out west. But also we are part of the refinery corridor that extends, from New Orleans basically west to Houston, more or less. And so a lot of the refinery byproduct is pet coke, and we are receiving the tar sands crudes from Canada and Venezuela. And pet coke is always a byproduct of oil refining. It's just that tar sands crude is like almost more pet coke than oil. It's very, very dirty and very inefficient kind of oil. It's mining. So we also have some tar sands mines in Alabama. We also have some of the frac sands mines in Mississippi. So there's many visible, directly visible things on the landscape, I guess. And then once these things are extracted, they're transported by pipeline, barge, and rail. So when you're thinking about different communities that are impacted by energy extraction, maybe one community is very much impacted by the mine, another might be very much impacted by the rail, and they're both impacted in very different ways, and how you would measure the impacts would be very different. There's ways to organize and connect people around, and against, or for protections against the same projects. For the United Bulk coal/pet coke piles, we flew the kite camera over the facility from a public levee and captured imagery not of the piles themselves, but of the material being transferred as it fell into the water. and into the Mississippi River. And that in the United States, we have the Clean Water Act, and these facilities have certain permits. They're permitted for certain discharges and not others. And if you read the permit language that was issued by Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, it said no spilling this black stuff in the water. So we were able, just with a simple camera, to capture permit violations. Also with the camera, we picked up, just a simple visual camera, a picture of a pile. So there's so much spilling of the pet coke into the water that we got a pile, which, there's something called ongoing violations that's particular to the U.S. law. So the fact that there was a pile meant that the spillage was ongoing and continuous. So if you can document that kind of thing with your kite camera or regular camera from public areas, we did it from the levee, which was public, and or if you were in the river, being in the river is generally the river is public, so you can take those pictures. And in the United States, as long as you're taking those pictures for communicative purposes, which we all are, we want people to see your pictures, then you're protected under First Amendment. We have done a little bit of I don't know if I'd call it dredging, but like we took a milk jug and we scooped the river bottom just downstream of where this material was spilling. And indeed, we found a lot of, it's half pet coke and half coal materials in the river. Oh, whoops. Do I have the URL for those research notes? I think if you search on, they're marked as coal, also United Bulk, which is the transfer facility. You can search Public Lab, or there's some of my older research notes from spring 2013 documenting this process and kind of the legal considerations. I'm very interested in learning different methods of calculating volume of piles, because that's something we haven't tried, but we want to get a hold of that. And then we also have a lot of allies in Houston. Houston and the Houston Ship Channel, they also have very many petroleum coke piles because of all the refineries there. And I think we're going to get on the phone with them later this week to discuss, both of these issues, documenting water permit violations and also calculating volume. But also particulate matter. That's something that has resonated more with communities that live next to the petroleum coke piles, because obviously they're breathing it, and it's, it's literally in front of their face. So that's obviously what they're more concerned with. And so in this case, we didn't use the SPEC or the Shinye sensor, some of the cheap, or the Dustuino, some of the more screening tools, because we already knew we had a problem. We at Gulf Restoration Network worked with Global Community Monitor and Danny Larson to pick up that, to use something. It was a more refined tool. It was the drum monitor, which enabled not only documenting levels of particulate matter, but also what kinds of materials made up the particulate matter. Just because you have particles doesn't mean that it's all coal or that it's all petroleum coke. You might be picking up road dust, or in our case, there's a lot of grain terminals too. So there was a lot of grain particles, little bits of corn, that were also making up the PM. So this drum monitor was a bit more sophisticated, and it allowed for some more intense kinds of analysis to determine what actually constituted the particulate matter. But those are two projects that, two kind of tool sets that Public Lab is developing that would help with these particular pet coke pile issues. About the fracking, I think the particulate matter is something that's come up again because of, not only because of the sand mines in Mississippi, and some of our members there. But in St. Tammany Parish, where they've proposed some of these drilling pads next to high schools, there are concerns about air coming off of the drill site. And one of the concerns has been the amount of particulates from the sands floating off of the drill site to areas where children are. So again, a screening tool for particulate matter would come in handy. Also, the hydrogen sulfide, I think, would come in handy. This has been a very unpopular project in Louisiana, which is surprising. We've been able to get the company to promise on paper for a closed loop for all their drilling muds and no waste pits. So that's interesting. That companies can do that, right? But I think that the amount of that we've only been able to pressure the company to promise to do that kind of process because of the work of people like Sarah and others all around the country documenting the particulate matter emissions coming off of fracking drill sites because of the frac sands, and the hydrogen sulfide that comes off of most any drill sites. We've at least gotten them to promise that this particular project in a suburban area has not moved forward, and as an environmental organization, we are moving kind of to the next level of trying to get the parish to ban fracking, which is a whole different thing. But in those kind of efforts, we hope we don't have to monitor anything, and just know that wherever you are in Chicago, in Canada, if you're monitoring impacts and you're sharing, then other people in other places can use your results to hopefully stop things from happening where they shouldn't, where it's not worth it, where the energy extraction is not worth it.
Thanks, Scott. I don't mean to, I'm not going to steal the floor, so please, if other people have questions, comments, suggestions, post them on the Public Lab chat page, which you can find on the OpenHour page, or just say them if you're here.
I have one for Holden. So Holden's just recently taken a new job working for a citizen water quality monitoring group out of Dickinson College called Alarm, and I know his group has done lots of work with community water quality monitoring projects, and I know you might actually have just started this week, Holden, but I don't know if you have anything to say about the kind of water quality monitoring work that you've been seeing in Alarm's communities. Oh dear, maybe I shouldn't have asked Holden because it's hard for him to talk.
Oh, I used to actually work for Alarm.
What a small world.
Yeah, really small world. So Holden, I don't know if you can hear me. Tell Julie I said hello. That's really great. I'm glad that we're connected in that way. But Holden, we've sort of lost you. I'm not sure if you can hear us anymore. Maybe try to reconnect.
I'll work with Holden about that anyway. So.
Alarm is a great organization, and I saw some information bouncing around about them on the Public Lab page a while ago, and I got pretty excited about it. But I don't need to answer for him or anything, and I worked with them a number of years ago. But their model for citizen science is really awesome. And I'm really excited to see their work on the fracking issue, especially. And I know they've been doing a lot of work on that for a few years up in Pennsylvania. So the water quality work that they've done is spectacular and has moved a lot of things in a lot of good directions and gotten a lot of people on board. So I'm not gonna talk for Holden about that, but can't seem to get him back.
I had another quick one for Scott too. Scott, the work with Global Community Monitor sounds awesome, and that's the kind of thing I'd love to see if we could try in Chicago too. Is that stuff published on Public Lab, or could you share some information about how you organize that and how much it costs, that kind of thing?
I could talk to you about that. It'd probably be easier to talk to Denny Larson himself. But certainly that is not a low-cost tool. It's a nonprofit scale tool, but it's not the hundreds of dollars. It's more of the thousands of dollars that I think I did post some note, though, on their results. You can go to gcmonitor.org for their publications, where they not only publish the data, but they also they publish the results as the community sees it, right? I mean, it's not just a science project, it's a community organizing endeavor.
Great. Holden, I think you're back now. Do you want to answer Sarah?
Yeah, so I didn't get the entire question, I think, but I'm really excited about starting with Alarm, later in the month. And what really attracted me to their organization was their model of really putting the data in the community's hands. It's very similar as far as method to the work that we've been doing in Chicago. Hosting these workshops and educating people on how to conduct these monitoring efforts. It's a different type of monitoring. Definitely, we'll be working with water quality instead of air quality, for example, or balloon mapping. But I'm really excited to see, what the community can do once, a lot of it is keeping, not only getting more communities on board all over Pennsylvania, and they actually just won a grant. I think they're going to be expanding into a few other states. I'm forgetting the names. I just learned about it about a week ago. But not only interacting with new communities, but also keeping in touch with communities that are already conducting these types of monitoring efforts. Chemical analysis on the water and that kind of thing around. Not limited to, but a lot of fracking sites, definitely. So I'm not sure if that answered the entire question, but
yeah.
Great, thanks, Holden. And I don't know if you heard me, but personally, I used to work for Alarm, and it's a great organization. Congratulations.
Oh, you did? That's awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Tell Julie I said hello.
I will.
Great. I have a question, Anne. This might be directed kind of at you, but just to the group in general. One thing that's, not to bring up political issues, and I'm not going in that direction at all, but that's been going on lately on the radar on the American politics is the question of the new pipeline. And it seems sort of interesting that we had this talk planned and now this is on the docket, and with everything, all the changes coming, and I just don't feel like we can overlook this big decision that's coming our way.
Are you talking about the Keystone pipeline?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And just that it's coming up for a vote here shortly in Congress. So I was wondering if you could, if this were to go forward with the work that you've been doing, have some advice for communities who might potentially be facing this issue in their backyard.
Yeah, I guess because I wanted to bring up the question that I've been having, which is it seems like everyone's project is sort of documenting like energy industry production that's existing and like how it's affecting the environment, and sort of what I'm trying to capture is like what a place is like before this comes through, and sort of like what are the important things to be identifying and noticing that could potentially change the decision that's being made. So I think in that sense it might apply to the Keystone pipeline, but I've also been thinking about sort of like the price of oil right now and how that's really affecting the conversation about whether or not this pipeline is going to be built. And so it almost seems like that, I don't know, like that's the thing that could decide what happens. Because mining bitumen, it's such an expensive and costly procedure, and it takes years to have these projects, to develop these projects up in the tar sands. And so they really follow, they follow the price of oil almost like the way Wall Street, follows the stock market. Like if the price drops, production instantly stops, and I guess the development of new projects instantly stops. And currently, I think in Fort McMurray, they're saying like we're going to continue mining the sites that already exist, but the ones that are being proposed will be suspended until you see what happens with the price of oil. Which I guess doesn't really exactly answer your question of how can communities, rally behind, what they can do. And I think that's something that I'm sort of struggling with right now too, is finding these communities. So I drove to the start of the pipeline in near Fort Saskatchewan in Alberta, and there aren't a lot of people living around there. Like it's right in the middle of a site of industry. Like on my left was like shell industry, and there wasn't much there. So so it started, like I'm trying to think like the people who will be affected and where they live may not necessarily. And also, sorry, I'm thinking about not the Keystone Pipeline, but the pipeline I'm following is, it's going through areas of wilderness where there's no people, but the potential effect of an oil spill, could leak into the watershed that could reach many people. And so it seems like the challenge for me is to, I guess, see how this could connect to people, even though it's not directly where they live. And how do we go about doing that?
Scott's commenting here, just to question, what will you lose if the pipeline is built, and how do we document what will be lost if the pipeline is built? And he's shared a link here that I'll post on the OpenHour page for everybody. Just great question. Does anybody else want to weigh in? And we're actually nearing the end of OpenHour, so any other suggestions or thoughts? I loved your idea, Sarah, about the energy tag. I think that's a great idea and a good way for us all to sort of follow along with some of these issues and see how they're interrelated. Does anybody else have other thoughts on this, or to conclude?
I mean, I'd love to see us go. I mean, I think the energy tag is a great place to start, but I'd love to see us go a bit further and kind of have some way of organizing the projects, or just being able to kind of see that this is about tar sands, this is about extraction, this is about use, and this is about consumption, in some ways to kind of tie it together systematically. I'm not quite sure how we could do that right now, if that's an energy wiki where we just kind of start organizing research themes, but it feels like that's a little bit hard to keep automatically updating.
Yeah, I know one of the first OpenHour calls that we actually had was sort of similar in mind with the water quality group, that were really interested in having one place where all those projects were kept together. And it didn't work well while we were on the call, but I think it was really sort of a spring-off point for a lot of people to just sort of start there and then go. So I think it's a great idea if somebody were to start a wiki so we could all edit and add different spectrums of where we see projects fitting in terms of energy. I think that's a great idea. Does anybody else have thoughts on that or anything else?
Yeah, I agree. I think starting an energy wiki would be good. Just, Sarah, hearing the projects that you've been working on, I see a lot of potential to use some of those tools up where I am. And if there's a way that, you can see a list of all the different individual projects we're working on, but see how it's still related by the material or the process, the extraction process, or, the byproduct of it. And see if there's a way to connect these communities, because, like Scott, you're working in Louisiana, but the product is coming from Canada, and if there's a way to link it all together.
Oh no, we're only stronger if we, work together. I guess to follow up on, how do we document what is lost? I've also used the aerial photography to take a picture of an environmental feature, and I put a link to a part of the Mississippi River. It's a river that will be paved over by an oil and gas road if the oil and gas company gets its way. You know, it's not a photo of a petcoke pile or a train or a refinery or anything, but it's, in this case, it was a photo of, you know, what's at stake. You know, if we're asking when is energy worth it, you know, what's at stake, what will be destroyed, and I think there's many cases, especially where there's not a lot of people, where kind of aerial photography can document, you know, what's at stake if destructive projects are allowed to move forward.
Yeah.
So thanks for your work, Anne. I appreciate it.
Thanks. I actually, I would like to ask one more question, and it's something that I was curious if it's, you know, if this was an issue that you've experienced, which is that a lot of the people that I'm trying to work with have a suspicion of aerial mapping, only because maps are a way that, you know, the industry uses to figure out, you know, what areas that they want to move into next. And so there's, let me see if I can try and explain how it works, but a lot of the land that they're currently, you know, trying to build new projects on belong to First Nations, to Indigenous communities, or if it doesn't belong to them, they have the right to use it in a traditional way. And so it belongs to the state or to the government, but they still have some say over, you know, what happens to it. And so environmental consultants are brought in to work with the communities to map the areas and then identify, you know, potentially like where they're doing trapping, you know, where they're hunting and fishing. And so one thing that I've encountered is, you know, potential suspicion or of this information becoming public. Like on the one hand, it would be useful, but on the other hand, you know, it's revealing areas that, you know, maybe they don't want the public to know, like maybe where their trapping cabins are or their trap lines are. And so I've been trying to like rethink how this project could look, and I've been leaning more towards using sound. Because a lot of what I hear is, you know, the industry comes in and, you know, these tailing ponds are built, and then, you know, we don't hear the sounds of frogs anymore, or there's different kinds of sounds in the air. And also it's a way to collect, you know, potential like histories, you know, oral histories, like stories of how people used to use these areas. And it's kind of like a way to like identify and locate a region without being too specific. And so I don't know, like, have you come across, I guess I'm just wondering, like, how do you use aerial maps in a way to like reveal information but not reveal too much? Has that ever been an issue? Well,
one, yeah, we've just been talking about aerial maps just because that's what we've have experience in. But I would, if that's not, if the community doesn't want that, then don't do it. I mean,
yeah,
you know, sound idea is great, but so maybe the answer is just you have to use an audio recording or don't do a map. Maybe find some other way if that's going to endanger what's at stake. If that's going to endanger the forest, don't take a picture of the forest, right? But Sarah, you had something.
Yeah, I just had, I mean, I think the sound idea is a really good one. I had a student this last semester who tried to who made a sound project kind of across an energy system. He did it all from audio clips online. But I think there's something really powerful to be done there, especially if you can add in it audio recordings of people telling you about what would be lost. And maybe those things can be located in a map interface. So I don't know if you've seen the project Bear 71. It's about Banff National Park, where they tracked a bear traveling across the park. And the landscape is incredibly schematic, and you interact with it through the map. But you click on different sites, and in that case, you see video of that location that was, you know, wildlife caught on a wildlife cam or something. But you could imagine doing that with audio clips, and that might be really nice, especially if you did like threatened species that would be lost. I also just had a really beautiful, like 10-year project from California where they went to the same place every year and tracked how the birds' songs declined over time. So you might think about doing some kind of long-term audio installation at points all the way along the pipeline or something. I think it could be beautiful.
Yeah, there's actually already like nonprofit groups or research institutes like doing that kind of collecting, and so I've been working with one out of the University of Alberta who potentially could give me this data because it's public.
Yeah.
So they've been recording birdsong in different areas in Alberta, and some of them are along the pipeline. And I think there's a group out on the coast doing hydrophone recordings. So yes, I'm trying to see if there's a way I can combine the audio that I could, collect with the ones that people have already been collecting over the years.
The thing that would be really nice, I think, for each of us to think about as we do these projects is, especially as we build a platform where you might put audio clips on it or something like that, is how can we build a platform that we can all share and add audio to, like if you wanted to add something from Louisiana, Scott, or me from Wyoming, how can we try and create a shared platform?
Yeah. Yeah, so, sorry, I've been thinking about this too. I'm working with another friend who's a bit of a better developer, and so we're thinking about using VoIP technology and setting up like a line that people can call, because everyone has access to a landline or a cell phone, and then they could call in, and use their phone as like a recording device in a way for stories. Or, I mean, it doesn't work so well as like a field recorder, but it could be a good way to like get people's thoughts.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of developing it for this site, but it's definitely something that could be more universal, that, potentially is a tool that other people can use on other projects.
Yeah, I love radio. I actually produce a lot of radio. I love audio. I'm a former musician. I find that, as an activist, the media is definitely, though, visually prejudiced, right? Yeah. What sells newspapers and what moves documentaries is video and the visual and the. So maybe it's not a map. Maybe you do not want to depict literal geographic depictions because of security reasons.
Yeah.
But most projects have some visual component nowadays. It's the world we live in. But I'd love to play your audio of Frogs of Canada on my radio station. And I'll be down in Plaquemines recording the frogs for you too. I promise. I'm planning on the planning meeting is Wednesday for my frog recordings.
Really? Okay. Well, another thing is that, doing this project, it's leading to other potential grants that I could sort of hop onto. So, for example, one of the professor I'm working with is applying for this huge Canadian governmental grant, and he just asked me like, what would I like to propose, and I feel like it could be a continuation of the project I'm currently working on, or it could be some kind of variation from it. So, yeah, I don't know if you want to jump on that, or if there's a way to continue it.
We got a comment here. From Matt, just Scott. Have you ever placed a pristine aerial photo of the Mississippi River, like the one you mentioned, or otherwise, next to a polluted picture? That might work well if you can get clear picture of polluted and unpolluted sites that are similar environments. Maybe just something to keep in mind. It could make a cool GRN poster ad if you've already done it right on. I want to see it. Also, he has this idea he's just posted that the frog noises versus the coal terminal noises. An interesting contrast. Thanks, Matt.
Right, particularly with fracking. I mean, we were talking about fracking. Fracking is noisy. It's tremendously noisy. And in the United States, as part of environmental review, and even in Louisiana, there are laws about aesthetic impacts. And sound is a very big part of those aesthetic impacts. So sound, yeah, that's a good thing to explore. The sound of industry is very disruptive, and it's just like a hydrogen sulfide leak. If you live in the shadow of the well site, you'll stop smelling it.
Yeah.
you stop hearing the industry if you if you live next to it. So yeah, I don't have all the answers for you, Anne, but sound is something I'm going to think about. I think a lot of the I'm part of a naturalist group, and so we're monitoring frogs with audio at night because you can't take pictures at night, and they only sing at night. And we will be documenting them in a database through some procedure. But one of the for natural things there's iNaturalist, which is just kind of a open platform for documenting natural history observations. So I don't know. I'll be quiet. I've talked.
Does anybody have any last comments? Thank you everybody so much for joining. Well,
that I'm happy to chat with anybody else about any of these projects anytime.
Great.
Yeah, is there a way to make this like a more regular chat?
Yeah. Yeah, so the open hour is a once a month thing. Great, thank you for bringing that up. But the topics change. So this is like a great topic that can go in so many different directions, and would be really nice to have again. So on the open hour page, there's another link there. It's a button that says request a live call. And if you fill that out, and you have a topic, maybe you can have a time in mind if you want to host it on Skype or on Google Hangout or a conference. I'll set that up for you, this group or other people you're interested in, and I'll post it if you'd like as well. There's a spot on there if you want it posted on the Open Hour page so that other people can join and I can help advertise for it, or if you want it to be a private, call. But that's another option as well. If this is a conversation that we'd like to have again, and we don't want to wait for another open hour on the topic, we can do that. But in the meantime, I'd love to see the energy page. That sounds awesome. And the tag, I'm totally going to start using that. So so on the Public Lab research notes and pages. Great. So open hour next month is a daytime call for us in the U.S. And I believe the topic is going to be on lending libraries. So, but just for further updates, check out the open hour page, and I will post it there. Thank you all so much. This was a great one. I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate everybody's comments and input. It was really enlightening.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you for bringing it together.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Nobody here.